So our guests are Reverend Dr. Elaine Heath, who is the former dean at Duke Divinity School, and today on her website self-identifies with a few words: author, speaker, retreat leader, consultant, and abbess. Also joining Elaine today is Professor Ruben Abito, who is Professor of World Religions and Spirituality and Director of Spiritual Formation at SMU Perkins School of Theology. He is also a teacher for the Marie Cannon Zen Center in Dallas, Texas. And we brought both of these people to you because we hope that some of the things that they spend time thinking about might actually spark some interesting ideas and directions for all of you. So our plan is for Elaine to share for a little bit, and then Ruben to share for a little bit, and then for us to give some time to them to actually exchange with one another before we put you into breakout rooms. So Elaine, let me turn things over to you, and I invite you to expand upon any introduction you might want to do, things you would want this group to know about you as you dive in.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you today. Thank you for the invitation. I'm here at Spring Forest, literally in the forest. This is where we live in intentional community with another family, and have various circles of people that are involved in things that we do. Our community is 3 years old, and I am the abbess. I've been the abbess of our community the whole 3 years. And as we have been finding our way forward to create a different face of a faith community, one that is healing of the environment, one that is healing of social injustice, particularly around immigration and human rights, we have discovered, not only because of the work that we're doing, but also we're creating a new model of ministry. I'm United Methodist, and Methodists don't have monastic communities, so we're creating one here. It's a different type of community. And so not only are we doing really innovative work here, but also the world is changing so quickly. And from my background as in academic administration and in leading nonprofits, 2 of which I founded, I've realized, especially in recent years, that I don't believe in strategic planning anymore. And it's interesting because I'm the sort of person, I'm a J on the Myers-Briggs, and I like to have my ducks in a row, and I like to have a plan and work the plan. But actually, what I've learned over time is that strategic intent is what matters. Strategic intent. And here in our community, our strategic intent is captured in 4 common spiritual practices. So the practice of prayer or meditation, the practice of working together, practices of tabling together, eating together and sharing food, growing food, and then neighboring together, doing what we do for the well-being of our neighbors, both human and non-human. So those practices actually capture our strategic intent. And we try to be radically open to what is coming toward us in order to discern what we're supposed to do next. Who's coming toward us? Where is energy rising? Where is life becoming more expansive? Where are opportunities presenting themselves? And that's kind of what we work with. As long as it supports and is consistent with our 4 spiritual practices, then we're ready to give it a go. If it doesn't match up, then we think, well, it may not be time, or it may not be the right thing for us to do. So when the resources, the ideas, and all of that come into alignment, then we're ready to try something new. And that's how we've evolved our way forward to being a really amazing, I know I'm bragging, but a really amazing experience of life together and doing good in the world, and having maximum capacity for innovation, for adaptation, and with minimal shaming and feelings of failure that are sort of toxic when we fail, when we try something and it doesn't work out. And we found that this is a very effective way to discern our way forward, much more effective than, because a strategic plan, you know, if you think about it, if you made a strategic plan for your organization in September of 2019, where would that have been by February of 2020? It would have been out the window, because we weren't expecting a global pandemic and all these other things. So as we think about how we're leaning into the future, strategic intent can serve us much more effectively than strategic planning. This does require, at least in our context, what I would call living with a contemplative stance. And I think Ruben's going to say a little bit more about leading from a contemplative stance. For me, that means showing up, paying attention, cooperating with what is life-giving, with what gives, with what's oriented in deep love for neighbor and for the earth, and then releasing the outcome of that cooperation. So that's how we try to practice it here in our community, and I find it very life-giving.
So Aline, can you say those things one more time in terms of your 4 practices and what you named as a contemplative stance, the aspects of that?
Yes, our 4 practices, traditionally in religious communities, these are called a rule of life. They're not about rules and regulations. It's about common practices. So our common practices are prayer, work, table, and neighbor. And you can think of those as kind of rubrics that have, you know, things that you do from day to day that fit in with those rubrics. That's our rule of life. And it also captures our strategic intent. We intend to live that way as a community for the sake of the world. And then the contemplative stance for me is to show up, to pay attention, to cooperate with, for me, what's divine, what is loving, what is wise, what is sane, what is life-giving and healing. So what is divine, and to release the outcome of that cooperation.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for repeating those pieces. Ruben, and again, anything you would want to add to your own introduction so that people in this room know the pieces of you would like them to?
Thank you. My day job consists in teaching to Christian students for ministry as they prepare to serve the world from their faith tradition about other religions, so that they realize that they're not the only game in town, and that there are many ways in which we humans can encounter the divine mystery in our different lives, and we name them differently. And that has been a cause of a lot of human tension and conflict and even warfare. So that's something that hopefully we can forestall by understanding that we're using different names for something that, if we really listen deep within, may resonate with the kinds of things that we're also passionate about. So it's my my hope in my teaching the Christian seminarians is that they get a sense of what they are called to do, not just for their own local congregation, but for the whole wide world. Anyway, so that they consider the whole earth community as their field of service, not just the specific congregation that they'll be assigned to, and so on. So that's one of the things that I am blessed to be able to do. And so that's my day job. But what my heart in really is in what I consider also part of what I do in service of a community of meditators, a contemplative community called the Maria Kannon Zen Center. I won't take too much time to explain that, but it's a community that welcomes people from all faith traditions or no faith tradition, just to sit together and do nothing and pay attention to our breath, and letting our mind settle into a place of calm and quiet, and in doing so open a new horizon in our lives. So anyway, those are the kinds of things that I find myself involved in my location here in Dallas. Before coming to Dallas, I was based in Japan for about 20 years. And before that, I was in the Philippines until after I finished the university there, before I was sent by the Jesuits to Japan. I have been a Jesuit and a priest, a Catholic priest, for all of those years before coming to Dallas. And then since then, I have stepped out of the Jesuit order, and I have been happily married for 30 something years, and we have two grown sons now, one in Austin and another in Eugene, Oregon, and we're learning from them always. But in any case, I just wanted to pick up what Elaine said about the contemplative stance, and that is what I would like to offer for today's session, namely to invite everyone to consider being a contemplative activist. That is also a theme from the Jesuit order, where I learned the bulk of what I offer to people. Ignatius of Loyola had this theme that he wanted all of those who followed him in service of the world and of the church to cultivate, namely to become a contemplative in action. What does that mean? Simply put, I would say that being a contemplative is to be one who is able to see things from the heart, not from just the immediate description that we can see through our visual field, but to see things from the heart. And the heart is the place where we find ourselves connected and resonated with all other beings. And so in that regard, to enter or to be in the world from that contemplative spirit, from that contemplative stance, is to then thereby relate to the world from the heart and not just from one's own egoic self. So with that, how do we cultivate a stance that sees things from the heart? I have learned a lot from the Buddhist tradition, and so the Buddha was asked, how do we also become awakened like you? When people met the Buddha after he had come out of his long search process, and he had experienced something that gave him deep peace and wisdom and a heart full of compassion for the world, he went back to the village and intermingled with people. And in seeing how he comported himself, people said, "Sir, you strike us as someone who is really at peace with yourself and who has a heart that is open to us all. Teach us how to be like you. How can we also be awakened like you?" And he gave them different kinds of guidelines, but the main point that he offered to them can be summed up in two words: stop your analytic mind from comparing, from searching, from expecting, and from comparing with the past or looking at the future, but let it just stop and let it be still and be aware now. That's the first word. That word is in Pali and Sanskrit, shamatha. Let your busy mind stop and be aware. And secondly, let your heart be open to see things as they are, vipassana. So in two words, it's how can we be awakened? How can we have that contemplative stance by which we see things from the heart? Stop and see. And so if we could all cultivate that way of stopping, taking a deep breath and looking at things not from a very subjective and planned program, but from the heart, and then respond accordingly, then somehow things might just turn out differently from somebody who's just trying to change the world in ways that they want. And I could see that based on the organizations that I heard you represent, you are all involved in something that wants to transform the world into something better, something more humane, something more sustainable, a world wherein we can all live as a family who love one another and care for one another. Am I not correct? So with that then, with that as our common aspiration, how can we all walk towards that? One of the big dangers in being involved in this kind of healing aspiration is that we can easily get burnt out, because there's so much out there that is so disconcerting and that is so hurting and that is so disappointing. what's happening in Ukraine and other places where there's warfare, and what's happening to our earth in a way that is now getting beyond our control. So sometimes we are tempted to just give up and say, I'm not making any difference. So this is really why that contemplative stance can be very, very crucial, so that we see things not so much from the standpoint of what results can come out of my actions, but what can I give to the world in a way that as I offer my life to the world at its service towards its healing, then in whatever might come out of that, at least I'm able to accept it, and I've given my all. So the rest is up to whatever everybody else can contribute towards its healing. And so for the Buddha, those who are able to sustain this practice of stopping and seeing on a day-to-day basis can be the persons who can also inspire others to be the same. And that's what I hope every one of us can participate in, this way of uh, lighting the fire that will help others that we are also in touch with to somehow participate in healing the world from that stance. And so for the Buddha, having arrived at that place of peace that came through his practice of stopping and seeing, he realized four things, and they were called divine dwellings, Brahma Vihara in Sanskrit. These are first equanimity. You are able to arrive at a stance of seeing things with not a passive or negative resignation, but with a sense of acceptance. What will be, but I will do all I can towards its transformation and toward healing, and so I'm at peace, no matter what. Equanimity. And that stance of equanimity also breeds a heart of loving kindness. Loving kindness means a heart of caring for each and everyone, summed up in the aspiration or Buddhist prayer, may all beings be at ease, may all beings be at peace. So if we have in our heart that wish and aspiration that all beings may be able to attain their fullness of well-being and might be able to attain their fullness of happiness, then that is the loving kindness that we can nurture in our own hearts towards everyone, both human and non-human, and the whole earth community. And thirdly, that also comes with a heart of compassion. Compassion means the capacity to suffer with and bear the wounds of those around me in a way that I share in their wounds and not look at it from a high stance that is just pitying or looking at it from a privileged position, but continuing to bear the wounds together and together seek its healing. And the fourth one would be called sympathetic joy. Wherever there is joy and celebration, I am with that. And I join in the celebration of the little triumphs. A new baby is born, a triumph in an activity is achieved, little things that happen that enable us to celebrate things that happen in our lives. I am also part of that joy. So with those four characteristics, we can continue to live in a way that we offer ourselves toward healing the world without burning out. So
Thank you.
I have some practical guidelines later on as to how we can cultivate that, but I'll reserve that until later.
Thank you. Elaine, I wonder if there's anything you want to respond to in what Ruben said, but I also want to invite you, as you're able to share a story or a particular example that speaks either to sort of what you referenced earlier or the place that Ruben has taken us.
Sure. Thank you. And I really appreciate hearing from a Buddhist perspective the same kinds of concepts that I'm talking about from a Buddhist perspective. Well, so for example, a friend contacted me the other day, well, it was probably 2 weeks ago, and said, hey, I met a guy from Togo who's living here now, and he used to be a goat farmer, and he really misses goats. Can I bring him to the farm to see your goats? And I said, sure. I take care of the sheep and goats at our farm. I'm actually a literal shepherd as well as shepherding people. And so he brought this friend over, and the friend doesn't have a car yet and everything. And so as I got to know George, I took him and we cleaned the barn together, and he began telling me about his goats in Togo and his life in Togo. And he said his dream is to become a goat farmer here. And but first he has to get his driver's license. It's kind of like, so I was thinking, this is great. And I just had a feeling, George is someone that we need. That's why George has come our way. And so as our relationship developed over the last few weeks, just by showing up and paying attention to George and paying attention to our needs here and George's needs, and kind of some things coming into alignment. Now I wrote a grant day before yesterday for $10,000, which we have $5,000 in reserve. And I wrote this grant to hire George part-time for 15 hours a week. And I feel about 99% sure we'll get this grant, and it'll pay him a living wage for this period of time. And then 2 days later, after I wrote the grant, I went to a party with a bunch of people I don't know. And I met a farmer who's in his 70s, and he has goats, and he really needs a helper with his goats because he can't trim their feet anymore. So he says, I don't even know. And he's a retired medical doctor. He says, I don't even know how to get a helper. I said, I have just the man for you. And so now I'm going to this other man's farm Thursday, and he can provide room and board for George. I mean, it's like all the pieces are coming together. And so I expect what will happen is that by the end of October, George will have full-time work taking care of goats, which is what he loves more than anything else. I've already connected him to our goat vet because George wants to go get a livestock management certificate at NC State, and our goat vet is a faculty member there. And so the way it's coming together for George in a way that's a blessing for him, but also a blessing for us. We can use George's participation on our farm, and it'll also help this doctor who does lots of good in the world, who's a Taoist. So this, and it's this sort of fluidity in the moving in and out of relation. It's all about relationships of love and support, compassion. The very things Ruben was describing are being enfleshed in this whole process by a bunch of different people. And so we'll just see where it goes.
So tell me, because you referenced grant writing in the middle of that, and that's something that so many of these organizations need to do. And I think aspiring to be in a place of strategic intent rather than per se strategic plan that we're going to, then execute is really challenging when you're writing a grant, or it could be challenging when you're writing a grant. So I wonder if you might just speak to that aspect of when you need to communicate with someone who actually wants to know what the results are. How do you honor still the spirit that you're bringing?
Well, when you write a grant, you need to write a grant to an organization whose sweet spot and your sweet spot match up. Because if you write a grant and you try to massage it just to get money so you can do what you really want, that never works. You probably won't get the grant. And if you do get the grant and it's not for something you really want to do, then you're stuck with it and you have to do it. So first of all, choosing the right places to write a grant. But when I wrote this proposal for the money so that we could hire George, the question is on the grant proposal, how you know you've been successful. So I wrote it that we'd like George to work with us to help us start this international garden project, that we have land and we want to create space for people to have their own gardens and grow their own food and have their own goat, because we do a lot of work with refugees. And we even have a little bus now that we can go pick them up and bring them every week to, and the bus came through one of these unusual encounters too. So I said, okay, the way we'll know we're successful is if after the end of 1 year, we have 4 families participating in our international Garden of Hope. I gave it some name, Garden of Hope, and that they're able to talk about how participation is impacting their lives for good. And that seemed like a reasonable sort of goal to put on there that also matches up with our strategic intent.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ruben, anything you want to pull out of that story and highlight, or is there a particular example of your own that you want to bring to this conversation?
Well, just to add to this sense of the enormity of the problem that befalls us, I'm always reminded of the story of the father walking with a 5-year-old daughter of his along a beachfront, and then they see all of the starfish that have been washed by the sea and lying on the sand and being heated up by the sun, and pretty soon they would die. And so immediately upon seeing that, the 5-year-old daughter just ran and threw one starfish into the ocean, and then another one, and kept doing that. And then the father said in a very kind of pessimistic tone, "Honey, there's so many of them, you can't make a difference." And so she says, "Well, but I can make a difference in this one, and then in this one, and then in this one." So that sense of really paying attention to the ones before us and hoping that we can at least make a difference here, rather than trying to rather than being overwhelmed by the enormity of the problem, gives us at least that, what Elaine calls that hope, that sense that we can have a way of living that can really make sense and make a difference in transforming us, just one by one at a time. So your story of George inspired me. So I hope I can visit you sometime soon and also meet George and learn a little about sheep and goats myself.
I hope so too.
Ruben, why don't you move to that place that you referenced of some of the practical, I don't know if you'd call them tips or ideas for nurturing the sort of posture and stance that you've referenced.
Sure. So thank you. The first thing I would like to just invite everyone to be able to do on a more regular basis, if you've not been doing so, is just to every now and then just to take a deep breath when you're in the midst of something and you're all engaged and you're now finding some leeway and you're seeing things happen around you. Once you realize that you can take a moment just to take a deep breath, then do so. And that deep breath can give us a new stance of freshness right here, right now, and it can give us again a sense of being grounded. So that's one thing, to take a deep breath throughout the day at those junctures when we find ourselves doing so. Like before writing an email, take one and then imagine the person I'm writing to in my heart, and then just continue writing that email from the heart, having taken that deep breath, connecting me with that person, and so on throughout the day. But another one is to give ourselves even just 1 hour a week of doing nothing. I know that we're also busy with we have a lot of things on our agenda, so sometimes we even have to lose sleep because of things that we do late into the night. I understand that. And yet, all the more so precisely because of that, we are called to just give ourselves that inner space to do nothing. And here's my suggestion. Just take 5 minutes a day for 6 days a week. And then on the other day that is other than the ones that you are able to give yourself 5 minutes, give yourself 20 minutes. And just sit in a place where you are comfortable. Take a deep breath and be aware of that breath, and just let that breath take you home here and now, and allow the mind to just settle with that breath and come here to the here and now, without trying to imagine, without trying to compare. Of course, the so-called monkey mind keeps getting in the way and wants me to remember something, or I have to do this, how many minutes do I have, and so on. Those kinds of things come up. But when we realize that, just see that, watch that, be aware, and then come back and just take a deep breath again. I have an app in my phone called the Insight Timer. So I give myself on those days 5 minutes, and the bell rings the first after I push it, after 5 seconds it rings, bong. So I just sit back and sit in a quiet way. And I could also do it in our backyard where I see more trees and more plants, or I could do it in a park nearby if I just take a walk and I just walk slowly. I just walk without needing to go anywhere. And in just that state of walking, I am simply allowing myself to be guided by the breath. And then
Mm.
the bell rings, 5 minutes, bong. And then I put my palms together and just show an act of gratitude without saying anything. I just bow in gratitude and then go on to whatever I need to do.
Mm.
5 minutes a day is enough. And again,
Beautiful.
go on a splurge of 20 minutes on another day. And
Right.
so that's just a very basic suggestion, and see what happens in your life as you do so.
I
That's
love it. I
Thank
love
you.
it. I love it. So before we move into small groups, Elaine, I think what I want to ask you is, what does this matter for leadership? Why does it matter that leaders in particular might engage in the sort of practices that build the sort of stance that Ruben has been speaking to? So, as someone in charge of things, what does it matter in terms of leadership?
It matters, first of all, because it keeps us centered, deeply anchored in what is loving and real and simple, so that we can be present to the people that we're leading and to the people that are giving us a hard time. I mean, so we can really be present. And it's also the kind of quietness inside that enables us to hear that inner voice of wisdom when we have to make decisions. And then also, you might think about, I think of Edwin Friedman's book, A Failure of Nerve. And he talks about the differentiated leader and the non-anxious presence. We might think of a non-reactive presence. I think sometimes you feel your anxiety, but being non-reactive, being able to regulate your anxiety so that you're still present. And these practices Ruben is talking about can help us to live from that space most of the time. And
Mm.
that's what our people need, because they're looking to us to lead them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruben, anything you want to add to what Elaine just said?
I'm sure that many of you, if not most or all, are already familiar with these things. I saw, uh, whose picture was that? Oh, is this Kimberly, who's already showing meditation and so on? I'm sure you're
Yes,
also familiar
Kimberly.
with these things in your own way. So I'm just talking to the choir. I'm just singing to the choir, so to speak. But if you find that such a practical pointer may be helpful, then by all means try it. And later on, if we meet again sometime somewhere, let us know whether there's anything that comes out of it.
Well, and I think whether Elaine and Ruben are speaking to new things for you, or whether they're speaking to things that feel like an echo, that you may or may not have had much time to experiment with, I think those are, plug into this wherever you are, including perhaps being rather experienced. We really welcome, the range of that.
Practicing strategic intent during transitions. Let me take a quick stab at that one. And this won't be a comprehensive answer, but we regularly have conversations, and I've done this with the last nonprofit that I founded called Neighborhood Seminary. Our leadership group would do this as well. We would take time where we would sit silently for a while. We would breathe in the ways that Ruben is describing. And we would allow to surface for us as we're breathing in silence, to notice what has been coming toward us, to just be able to notice and name what's been coming toward us. Where have we felt energy increasing within ourselves? Where have we felt energy draining away? So those are actually forms of an Ignatian type of discernment process that Ruben knows a lot more about, because having been a Jesuit. But and then we'll talk about it. We'll say, what have we been noticing? Where's the energy rising? Where's the energy draining? Who and what are coming toward us? And we'll go around the circle and we'll name it. We'll just name it to each other. And that begins to create a common thread. And then we start noticing, what are the common threads here? And as we further reflect on this together, we begin to discern our way forward. That works better with smallish groups than it does with big groups. So that's my answer for now for that one. I hope that's sufficient. There was one other one here I wanted to take a quick stab at. How to begin shifting a large bureaucratic organization toward strategic intent and toward this sort of agile leadership culture. It's really hard. It's really hard, particularly if your bureaucratic environment has bullies running the show. If you've got bullies running the show and the climate is toxic, it's almost like, I don't know, it's pretty tough. But you can introduce in an organization that's a sizable organization, you can introduce some of the concepts of asset-based community development and begin having circles, conversation circles, and identifying assets and common it's kind of like what I just said, where you're identifying common threads, but you can do this in circles. And I started doing this at Duke when I first went to work there as dean. They asked me to guide a strategic planning process to guide the school into a new future, because the world is changing and the needs of clergy who are trained at seminaries and schools like Duke, that their leadership capacity is very different now, what they need than what they might have needed 20 years ago. And so I introduced circles, I introduced asset-based community development principles, and began a broad-based listening process and gathering this information. And I made sure that we had all of the representation and voices of all the people, from housekeeping staff to bishops to alumni and kind of everybody. And I was very pleased with how that process was coming along. It got interrupted by some dysfunctional politics, but had I had enough time to work it through, I think it would have been very successful. And that's a big institution. So.
Yeah. Elaine, before Ruben, I of course would love for you to share with us any advice around having these postures and practices become habit. But before I invite you to speak to that, Elaine, I am wondering this question of prayer work, table neighbor, like how did you get to those four? And when do you ever look at those again and be like, maybe we should, change those in some way? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I do think that feels really important as these organizations think about, well, what is their identity that's going to form their purpose? What is our identity? What is our core? How do we understand that?
Well, the way that happened was my husband and I own half the property, and we bought the farm next door 4 years ago. And that involved bringing a farmer who's also a pastor to come and live on the farm and do community with us. He had been a student of mine years ago. He's from Kenya, and he had the right skill set and all, because my husband and I don't have a background in farming. We've had to learn how to farm over the last several years. So what we did, and Francis, the pastor and farmer, is of a similar mind about discernment practices. So what we did was we just started doing life together. We started doing infrastructure repairs on the farm. We started praying together and just kind of doing life together, and letting things emerge, and then naming what was emerging as we paid attention. So we were really showing up and paying attention. So we'd been doing this for a couple of years, and one day I just sat down and I wrote down, okay, this is what appears to be our core practices. Give us life, that don't drain our lives, that give us life, and that are helping us to show up as our best selves, and to feel like we're in alignment with what we're being called to do in the world. And so I just wrote those 4 words down. That seemed right. And so I floated it past the rest of the community. And I said, does this seem right to you too? And they said, yeah, that's it. And so we were actually putting language to what was already real, rather than setting some aspirational goals and trying to live into them because they thought they were smart goals.
Yeah. And I think also, just to name what I noticed in terms of your leadership role in that moment of feeling moved to actually put something down and check in. That can be a role that a leader plays. Yeah. Ruben.
Yes, thank you. And by the way, I loved what Elaine said, especially at that point when you admitted it's hard. We're facing very big odds here. It's an uphill climb in so many ways, and on all the dimensions. But in the midst of that, yet there is something in us that can enable us to muster through and go through it with a heart that appreciates it all. So again, in response to the question, how do you make breathing habitual? Well, if you're not breathing already, you're dead, for one. So might as well pay attention. The main thing is, well, every now and then, just to know that I am breathing. And when I breathe, it's not just this air that I am breathing as an individual, but this air that I am taking into my lungs may have come from the trees of the Amazon about 12 hours ago, and they were blown by the global winds in my direction. And this very breath thereby connects me with all the living beings that had interaction with this oxygen together with the other chemicals that I'm now receiving. And so one full breath, if I am able to do with full attention, enables my heart to really feel that gratitude for everyone to whom I owe this breath. So just to make it repetitive action throughout the day is my first recommendation, to make it habitual by just repeating it and repeating it until, if we don't pay attention, then we feel that there's something missing. So when we know that there's something in my life, there's something askance that I need to take care of, that's when something has become habitual, so that when we veer out off the path, we feel there's a difference. And so that's one indication. So again, my suggestion is, at least in the morning as we wake up, to make that conscious intent that we're now gifted with a new day. To take 3 deep breaths is what I'd like to recommend. I have other specific practices to that, but it's connected with a religious background that I don't need to impose on anybody. But whatever you would like to do in terms of accompanying that, at least 3 full breaths in the morning with intention that I'm breathing together with all breathing beings. And I'm grateful for this new day, to begin each new day with that kind of intentional breathing. And then toward the end of the day, before plunking into bed so tired that I can't do anything anymore, just take a minute or so, just again to breathe in and breathe out, and recall the day with gratitude. Recall elements that I may have missed out on and say, shucks, I missed that. I'm sorry, I need to get my act straight. So to note those things that first I'm grateful for, to note those things that I need to be sorry for, and then thirdly, to hold in my heart anyone who may need my support, asking me for prayers or asking me for their own support. So I hold people who have been, who are suffering or who may need more support, and which I can offer only in terms of intentions. And then I take my breath knowing that I am in good hands, and then I go to sleep. And then in the middle of the day, throughout the different things we do, for example, we usually take, for most of us, 3 meals a day. So before every meal, I have inherited this from the Japanese, but they simply fold their hands together before a meal, and they say the word itadakimasu, which means I receive with gratitude. But you don't have to say the word, but just folding the hands before a meal and taking a deep breath, or maybe 3, or saying whatever you'd like to say in words, like Christians do with grace. But whatever you say or think, just breathe in before taking the meal, and somehow a sense of gratitude for whoever brought this food before us can well up in our hearts. And when we notice that everybody is involved, like the people who, for example, if I'm drinking coffee, the people in Guatemala who raised this coffee under very oppressive conditions, and then the truck drivers who brought these wholesale to the warehouse, and then the grocery clerks and so on who sell the coffee in retail. All of them are part of what I feel gratitude for when I sip that coffee, and so on. So if throughout the day we're able to make this intentional habit of just stopping and breathing, somehow our hearts will expand to embrace more and more in gratitude, and my life can thereby be transformed accordingly as one who is always acknowledging that gratitude. Brother David Steiner Rast, a very well-known Christian monk, has this lifelong theme of gratefulness. If you really feel that gratefulness, it can change you. And so let's have that sense of gratefulness be the message that we spread throughout, because there's so much that we can be grateful for in spite of the odds that we face in this crumbling earth.
Thank you. Thank you.
You.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Ruben. I'd like